Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Meher Sher and these are the headlines. At least 12 people have been killed in an airstrike in Afghanistan's northeastern province of Takhar. A spokesman for the provincial governor says another 18 have been injured in the raid in Talokan city. He says a religious seminary was hit accidentally and bombed. Turkey says it will send its troops to support Azerbaijan over the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict if it requests. Turkish Vice President Fuat Oktay said Ankara will not hesitate to launch boots on the ground in Baku's favor. Meanwhile, Azerbaijan says its military has forced Armenian troops to flee from their position in the mountains of Gubadli. Turkey says it will extend a gas exploration mission in the eastern Mediterranean. The move has raised hackles in neighboring Greece. 3 research vessels originally scheduled to end work today will now remain at sea till October 27th. Yesterday, Greece urged the EU to reconsider its customs union with Turkey over survey activities in the sea. The United States has accused Iran of interfering in the 2020 election. U.S. Director of National Intelligence John Ratcliffe blamed Tehran during a news conference in Washington. He alleged Iran sent spoofed emails designed to intimidate Democratic voters and incite social unrest. Ratcliffe also blamed Russia again for obtaining voter information. Globally, the coronavirus infections toll has surpassed 41 million, with over 1.13 million fatalities. India has recorded 702 deaths and nearly 56,000 infections overnight as its caseload rises to 7.7 million. In Pakistan, 10 more people have died of the virus in the last 24 hours, taking the toll to over 6,700. Well, those were the headlines. More news in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. At least 12 people have been killed in an airstrike in Afghanistan's northeastern province of Takhar. A spokesman for the provincial governor says another 18 have been injured in the raid in Talokan city. He says a religious seminary was hit accidentally, bombed. He says children are also among those killed. The violence in the country has intensified since the start of the intra-Afghan talks in Doha. Moving on, Turkey says it will send troops to support Azerbaijan over the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict if Baku requests it. In an interview, Turkish Vice President Fuat Oktay said Ankara will not hesitate to launch boots on the ground in Baku's favor. Oktay said President Tayyip Erdogan declared support for Azerbaijan the day clashes resumed. He asserted that Ankara stands by its earlier commitments, but he mentioned that Azerbaijan is yet to make such a request. Meanwhile, Baku said its military has forced Armenian troops to withdraw from their position in the mountains of Gubadli. Baku's defense ministry said Azeri artillery dealt heavy damage, killing multiple battalion commanders and destroying weaponry. Turkey says it will extend a gas exploration mission in the eastern Mediterranean. The move has raised hackles in neighboring Greece. 3 research vessels originally scheduled to end work today will now remain at sea till October 27th. Yesterday, Greece urged the EU to consider its customs union with Turkey over survey activities in the sea. Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis blamed Ankara of violating international law. Tensions between both countries have been escalating over energy resource-rich waters of the eastern Mediterranean. Moving on, the United States has accused Iran of interfering in the 2020 election. U.S. Director of National Intelligence John Ratcliffe said this in a news conference with FBI Director Christopher Wray in Washington. Ratcliffe alleged Iran sent spoofed emails designed to intimidate Democratic voters and incite social unrest. Ratcliffe said these actions are desperate attempts by desperate adversaries. He also blamed Russia again for obtaining voter information.
This data can be used by foreign actors to attempt to communicate false information to registered voters that they hope will cause confusion, sow chaos, and undermine your confidence in American democracy. To that end, we have already seen Iran sending spoofed emails designed to intimidate voters, incite social unrest, and damage President Trump.
Iran's mission to the UN has denied the accusations. Spokesperson Alireza Mir-Yousefi said Tehran has no interest in interfering in the U.S. election. And moving on, Iran says it has started its annual air defense exercises with a display of ground-to-air missile systems. Local media said the drills are designed to test missiles, radar, and reconnaissance systems. It said the exercises will involve fighter jets, bombers, and drones, especially locally manufactured military equipment. Earlier, Iran said it is self-reliant in its defense and will not resort to a weapons buying spree. Now, the United States says it is designating 6 China-based media companies as foreign missions. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says the move is aimed at pushing back against what he called communist propaganda. In a news conference, Pompeo said the State Department is not placing any restrictions on publication of these outlets. He also said the United States will also launch a dialogue on China with the European Union on Friday. The State Department previously required Chinese media outlets to register as foreign missions. In March, the State Department slashed the number of journalists allowed to work at U.S. offices of Chinese media outlets. Now, the global toll of COVID-19 cases has surpassed 41 million, with over 1.13 million fatalities. India has recorded 702 deaths and nearly 56,000 infections overnight, increasing its caseload to 7.7 million. In the U.S., the death toll has crossed 222,000, while over 8.3 million people have been infected. The latest on the pandemic is in the following report.
Healthcare systems in a number of countries are being overwhelmed as the second wave of COVID-19 takes the world by storm. In Europe, authorities in countries from Poland to Portugal have expressed mounting alarm at the renewed crisis confronting their health infrastructure. The growing number of cases in France, coupled with the setting in of winter season, has swamped the hospitals. Meanwhile, Spain has become the first European country to exceed 1 million coronavirus infections.
Over the last week, we've seen, and that has been a phenomena in all of Barcelona and Catalonia, an increase in cases needing emergency assistance for COVID patients and a consequent increase in critical patients. Now, we can say that we have 14 patients in our ICU, that is to say more than in September, and we already have quite a few more hospitalized patients who practically occupy 2 floors instead of 1.
5 of the countries with the highest cases are in Latin America. Pan American Health Organization says the region is not out of pandemic's first wave. It has urged LATAM countries to not relax measures aimed at containing the spread of the virus until vaccines become available. Meanwhile, in Argentina, some 70,000 health workers have been infected with COVID-19 so far. Healthcare workers in the country have taken to streets to demand better working conditions.
Our working conditions and salaries are precarious, insecure, illegal, and very dangerous. We are dying because of working conditions. In our country, we have had more than 100 deaths because of working conditions. In Buenos Aires, it's 11. So 10% of deaths are happening in the capital, which is meant to be where health workers are better prepared.
Over in Australia, Melbourne's 5 suburbs have been put on high alert after new infections sparked fears of a fresh outbreak.
Pakistan's COVID-19 death toll has topped 6,700 after 10 more people lost their lives to the virus overnight. The health ministry says 736 people tested positive for the disease in the past 24 hours. The ministry said there are over 9,000 active COVID-19 cases in the country. It said out of over 325,000 countrywide cases, more than 309,000 have recovered so far. The ministry said over 142,000 cases have been detected in the Sindh province, while Punjab has reported over 101,000 cases. In the capital city of Islamabad, over 18,000 have been infected so far. Moving on, buildings have been set aflame with reports of gunfire in Nigeria's biggest city of Lagos after security forces shot at protesters. Amnesty International says forces have shot dead at least 12 people while they were protesting against police brutality. Armed police have tried to enforce around-the-clock curfew in the commercial capital and some other regions. But groups of young people blocked a number of major roads with overturned traffic signs and rocks. Youth stormed and set ablaze a major TV station with links to a ruling party politician. A viral video allegedly showing police officers killing a young man sparked the unrest in Lagos 2 weeks ago. Now in Guinea, 13 people have reportedly been killed following days of unrest after a tense weekend presidential election. In a statement, the security ministry said 2 police officers were among those slain. It said there were clashes in opposition strongholds outside the capital Conakry and elsewhere in the country. The violence follows President Alpha Conde's run for a 3rd term. Conde says a constitutional referendum in March has reset his 2-term limit. He has called for calm as opposition protests over initial results from Sunday's election, which showed Conde leading the field. Now, the U.S. says it has begun the process of removing Sudan from its list of state sponsors of terrorism. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says Washington is also working to get Khartoum to recognize Israel. Speaking to the media, Pompeo said a lot of work has been done regarding this. Pompeo added he believes there will be enormous bipartisan consensus over Khartoum's removal from the list. Earlier, President Donald Trump announced a delisting of Sudan after it transferred $335 million to compensate U.S. victims. Meanwhile, Sudanese security forces fired tear gas to disperse protesters calling for reforms. Medics say at least 1 protester has been killed and several others injured in the clashes with police across Khartoum. In other news, French police have launched an investigation after 2 women were stabbed near the Eiffel Tower in a suspected racist attack. Police have arrested 2 white female suspects who allegedly shouted "dirty Arabs" as they launched the assault. Prosecutors say it is too early in the probe to classify the attack as a hate crime. This comes a day after President Emmanuel Macron decided to disband a Muslim organization following the beheading of a teacher who showed blasphemous caricatures to his pupils. Muslim activists have accused Macron of trying to repress Islam in the country. And in Thailand, the government has ordered the lifting of emergency measures imposed to curb ongoing protests. In a statement, the government said the violent situation has eased. It read the situation now allows government officials and state agencies to enforce regular laws. For the past 3 months, Thailand has been marred by protests against Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha. The demonstrators were also demanding slashing of Thai monarchy's powers. Thai lawyers for human rights said the police have arrested at least 80 people for taking part in the protests. Now, NATO says 2020 will be the 6th consecutive year of increased defense spending by European allies and Canada. Speaking ahead of a virtual meeting of the alliance's defense ministers, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said he is hopeful this trend will continue. He also said NATO will continue reducing tensions between Greece and Turkey in the eastern Mediterranean.
COVID-19 has not made all the challenges go away, so it remains vital to invest in our defense. At this ministerial, we will discuss our progress toward fairer burden sharing.
We'll be back with more news in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. 3 crew members of the SOYUZ MS-16 mission have returned to Earth after undocking from the International Space Station. The trio, comprising 2 Russians and 1 U.S. astronaut, landed in Kazakhstan. Chris Cassidy, Anatoly Ivanishin, and Ivan Wagner spent 196 days in orbit after arriving at the space station on April 9th. NASA and Roscosmos have reported that all 3 astronauts were well. As part of COVID-19 precautions, the rescue team meeting the crew was tested for the virus. The 3 will leave for home after a brief medical checkup. NASA's Kate Rubins and Roscosmos' Sergei Ryzhikov and Sergei Kudzverchkov arrived at the orbiting outpost a week ago for a 6-month stay. And British artist Banksy's remix of a masterpiece by Claude Monet has sold for more than $9.88 million. The 2005 work was auctioned in a live stream by Sotheby's in London.
One of the most important paintings of Banksy's provocative career.
Banksy, who has never revealed his identity, began his career spray painting buildings in Bristol, England. He has become one of the world's best-known artists. His Show Me the Monet was first displayed 15 years ago in London. The work is based on Impressionist painter Claude Monet's The Water Lily Pond. But here, the idyllic scene has been ruined by fly tipping, dumping of waste in undesignated areas. Paris sales room auctioned a Pablo Picasso painting, Tête d'Homme, for $5.2 million. While Japanese artist Kazuo Shiraga's painting Chikaisei Shinsanshi sold for more than $3 million. And Paul McCartney will release McCartney III in December, 50 years after his first solo album. It is a new collection of stripped-back songs, all written, performed, and produced by the ex-Beatle. Recorded this year in Sussex, it joins 2 other solo albums, McCartney and McCartney II. They were created by the 78-year-old in 1970 and 1980 when he was seeking a creative rebirth. Speaking of the album, McCartney said it was more about making music for yourself rather than doing a job. McCartney's most recent album is 2018's Egypt Station, and the musician was still touring last year. Britain has announced resuming the post-Brexit trade negotiations with the European Union today. The initial phase of the negotiations will take place in London and will last for 4 days. Just a few days after announcing that talks have ended, Downing Street said in a statement that it will discuss future ties with the EU delegation. It stated both parties have jointly agreed on a set of principles for handling the intensified phase of talks. London said the meeting will try to bridge the Brexit's most difficult policy gaps between Britain and the EU. And moving on, most shares in Asia Pacific have declined following the IMF's downgrading of its growth forecast for the region. The funds have lowered its forecast to minus 2.2% in 2020, calling it the region's worst outcome in living memory. In Japan, the Nikkei 225 and the Topix index fell close to 1%. Mainland Chinese stocks are also trading lower. South Korea's Kospi declined close to 1%. Shares in Australia fell, with the ASX 200 down marginally. But Hong Kong's Hang Seng index has managed to edge above the flat line, gaining fractionally. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.